My dad and I passed by this far site farther down the loop and find a quieter site. And we go to the back, and we were sitting there talking for a few minutes, and the sun was just going down, but there was still plenty you could see, and the woods are at our back. And we hear this really quick rustling. It just kind of comes right up, maybe like 20 yards behind us. We both turn around at the same time. I look back, and I see what looks like a black dog appear and stand profile, but kind of look at us. It was like a vague shape of a dog. There were no defining features, and it had like a fuzzy outline. And it just stood there for a second, and then turned and dissolved, like all in one. It just kind of went out of existence.
They claim that our eyes will just be created a slightly different from what they are. We talk these see things are not normal.
Welcome to Strange Familiars. How are you doing tonight, Allison?
All right.
On tonight's show, I'm going to be talking with Jason, who has this really neat black dog sighting. He saw a black dog. His father was with him. He said he'd been telling the story over the years, and his father took him aside and said, "That's not what I saw." His father saw a tombstone that kind of glided towards him instead of like the black dog figure.
So this is what they were both looking at.
Yeah, they both saw something, but he saw a black dog and his father saw this like tombstone. How creepy is that? They weren't in a graveyard either.
Is that our first floating tombstone report?
It might be. It might be. Jason also has a disembodied leg sighting. He's got entities appearing in his house after beginning magical practice, some UFO stories, and more. Before we get to him, I would like to thank everybody who came out on Saturday in the blistering heat.
That would be an understatement, yes.
Brutal heat last Saturday.
I don't remember a time recently I've been that hot.
No, me either.
It was
difficult.
Yeah.
And this is no fault of the organizers or anything.
Well, no,
but
this is purely the weather.
But I mean, it's no fault of theirs that we can't park close. You know, it's in the middle of a pretty big cemetery. We have to load our stuff in. There's no good place to park. The streets are closed down. It's not their fault. This just happens to be the way it is that day because of the car show and stuff. It's a lot. It's a lot of work. So
we are very happy for anybody who came by.
Yeah, we had a great day other than the heat.
And so far, Rick and I did not kill Jodorowsky.
Oh, okay. Yes,
We talked about him on the weekend. He's a 96-year-old man. He is not dead as of yet.
I also want to thank everybody who has so far donated to the Strange Familiars GoFundMe. Thank you so much. A good many people. We had a little debate before we started here as to whether we should name people, and some people donated anonymously, and I think they probably don't want to be named. So instead of doing a big long list, we're just going to say thank you to everybody because we're not sure who wants to be thanked, who wants their name on the show, who doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you to everybody who donated. It's a massive help. Even if we don't make the goal, you're getting us there incrementally. Mm-hmm. We're much closer than we were before.
Like get one piece of equipment.
Exactly. You're taking a huge bite out of this. So thank you so much. If you want to donate, and again, the show's going to go on if we don't get the tech upgrades. I know this is an uncertain time, so don't worry, the show's not going anywhere. But if you can afford to help us with this stuff, we do need some new tech. It's a bit expensive. The GoFundMe is up on our website. We have a post up there, but I'll put links in the show notes as well. And once again, thank you to everyone who's donated. It's an incredible help. Thank you so much. All right. Let's go ahead and get to Jason's stories. I'd like to welcome Jason to Strange Familiars. How are you doing tonight?
Doing well. Good to be here, Tim. Thanks for having me.
All right. I'm excited to get these stories down. About where did this take place? Some people don't want to give exactly away, and that's fine.
Yeah. Generally, this is an area of northern Minnesota. The specific story we'll start out with is, like northern central, getting up towards Fargo.
Okay.
I definitely don't want to give it away just because of kind of the nature of the story.
Of course. And about when did this take place?
This was 2017.
Okay.
So my family and I were at this campground in northern Minnesota. Grandparents started going there, in the 60s, something like that. So it's been every year just a place we've always gone to. I love it up there. 2017, my sister was hosting in this campground loop. And so we were there helping her, I think, close down. It was very quiet there. So it was just us in this loop. And the loop was right on a lake. And I remember we were walking around the loop. And this one site at the end of the loop, which had always felt somewhat strange, but whatever, was closed, and she informed us that it had actually been closed, I think, by the county and the local tribe up in that area because there were artifacts found indicating it was probably a burial site.
Okay.
So that was kind of a way of setting a tone. So, I think a day or two later, my dad and I were walking on the loop, I think after dinner, and again, passed by this far site, and just the whole time it just had like a tone. Like, don't be careful on that. So anyway, we walk by it and go farther down the loop and find a quieter site, and we go to the back, and it's longer, and then in the back there's just a picnic table that's kind of right up against a tree line. And we were sitting there talking for a few minutes, and the sun was just going down, but there was still plenty you could see. And we're facing in towards the site, and the woods are at our back, and we hear this really quick rustling. It just kind of comes right up, maybe like 20 yards behind us. We both turn around at the same time. I look back, and I see what looks like a black dog kind of appear and stand profile, but kind of look at us. But it was like a vague shape of a dog. There were no defining features, and it had like a fuzzy outline. And it just stood there for a second. And then my dad and I looked at each other, and I looked back, and it turned and dissolved, like all in one. It didn't run off. It just kind of went out of existence.
Huh. Now, when it appeared, you say it appeared, like, do you mean it sort of snapped into existence too, or did you see it like coming from someplace?
It was weird. It was like, so you could hear it, like hear the woods like rustling, but then like as we turned around and saw it come in, like it almost like it like came out of a pinhole and just like,
wow.
And it kind of left that way too.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask how it, like, if it just disappeared, or did it, like...
It's like it turned to run, but it was just gone before you could even see it turn away. So Dad and I are like, okay, that was weird, and we left very quickly.
He saw it too.
So here's the interesting part of this. So since then, like every family gathering, the story kind of comes up one way or another, and I'm always the one telling it. And this last year, I think over Christmas, told the story, blah, blah, blah. And he and I went out to his garage just for he likes to have a cigarette. We just talk about whatever. And we were just standing there quiet, and he's like, you always tell the story that one way, but that's not how I experienced it.
Interesting.
So, well, what happened for you? And he said, well, we were sitting at that table and I heard the rustling. But when we turned and looked, I didn't see a dog. I saw what looked like a gravestone just slowly moving towards us.
Wow.
And he said that when we turned and looked at each other and looked back, it was almost at us.
Wow.
At the table. And he got up and walked away because that thing was going to touch him.
Right.
So, two completely different perceptions of
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. Which, I mean, I've told the story a number of times on the show. When I took John to Site 7, I know we were looking at the same light, and he was describing something different than I saw. So,
right.
Yeah, I think this happens. I do. I think it happens sometimes. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, just like a little additive to that is the next night, or is either that night or the following night. My sister knows this better than I do, but so my sister had her whole compound set up in the campground host site, and then I took another site over, which is almost directly across from where the site was that my dad and I were in. But I had a dream that night where I basically, as far as I can tell, I was from the point of view of a dog or a wolf, and I was bursting through that whole campground, like zigzagging up and down, and I zigzagged right to my tent, and I jumped through the tent into my body, and when I did, I shot up.
Oh, wow.
And woke up.
Wow.
And it was so intensely real, which just added to like the strangeness into the whole thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So, dog shape, you said kind of fuzzy, outlines wasn't real defined. Did you notice any eyes or anything like that?
No, that was what was really striking about it to me, was that it looked like it looked like really like solid smoke, but super black.
Wow.
Like kind of like pulling in light, kind of black.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was wild.
Wow. Do you know if anybody else reported anything around, there around that time, or well, any other time for that matter?
Nothing like that. But I've talked to my sister, and she hosted all around the whole campground, and she would talk about like there was an area where there used to be cabins, and she was set up in this one site, and it was at dusk, and she said that she and her dog were just kind of focusing on the fire, and every once in a while she'd see somebody stand up behind this bush, and then when she'd look, they'd quickly go down. This happened a bunch, and then she went over there and nobody was there.
Interesting.
But it's very common. It is a common thing for people to see people in that area.
Oh, it's worth noting, I think. Worth noting.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, kind of a tangent off of that, only because it's kind of the same area. A little bit farther northwest, I went and stayed at this cabin with some friends. And it was a very well put together cabin, very comfortable. But another place where the moment I got there, it was just like, it wasn't spooky or scary, but it was just like happening. Like there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And so this place had trails, I don't know, actually probably about a mile's worth of trails around the property. Some went into the woods. And so we got there, got set up, and then started walking the trails just to get a lay of the land. And we got into the woods, kind of in this poplar grove, and the energy shifted to something much more sharp. And there was this smell. I mean, it smelled like a dead animal that had been rotting there for a long time. And I don't know, we kind of moved past, mentioned it, but then moved past it. And then we're like walking the edge of this property, and it felt like it was so desolate. It reminded me of, I don't know if you ever seen the old Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh no, actually I haven't.
That's probably fine. It's pretty intense. But It's so like in that film, like there's a lot of long shots of just kind of desolate, dead landscape.
Mhm.
And it just felt like that. It just felt like empty, like bizarrely empty. So do that walk, get back, and I went and took a nap upstairs, and I had my window open right behind me, and like I'm laying there, and after I'd woken up, and I was just laying looking outside, and I just heard this like shuffling outside the window, kind of like an elderly person.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked down there, and nobody's there, and I heard it like 2 or 3 times. So another weird thing. But later that evening, we went on that walk again, same trail, and we get up that hill where that poplar grove was, and it was like we were all talking and laughing, and then as soon as we got up there, it was we all stopped, we all put our heads down, and that smell was there and was more intense, and that oppressive feeling was even more intense. I just remember like all of us looking down, walking, and for like a half mile, we just like marched in silence.
Wow. Yeah.
And we got out of there, and one of my friends was like, we were all super quiet, and he just looked at me and was like, that was weird, right? And then later that night, we were all hanging out the fire, just talking, and way off in the distance, I could hear this like moaning. And the first thing that came to my mind is we were in northern Minnesota. I was like, okay, is that a moose? That's because they have that kind of guttural call. So it went on and then stopped. And then like 5 minutes later, it sounded like it was a little bit closer. And at that point, another one of the guys sitting around the fire noticed it. And I didn't acknowledge it with him. I just wanted to see, like, how are we noticing this? And then, kind of same deal, started up again. And now he's, like, sitting up, and I'm sitting up, and it's, like, it's getting much closer, and it's like a kind of sound. Like, it wasn't just a call, it was, like, pained moaning. And then does it one more time, and it's right at the edge of the wood line. And all of us turn around and honestly just like thought somebody was at the wood line dying. And one of the guys called out like, hey, do you need help? And then just went silent. And then nothing happened after that. Like there's no real end to that story. Just that like that place had a vibe and it was well aware of us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that sometimes that's all you get, you know?
Right.
You're not going to get tapped on the shoulder by a 10-foot monster. Sometimes I think you just get you get that. Yeah.
The land is acknowledging that something else is happening on.
Yeah, I think so.
Happening there.
I think so. Or I mean, who knows how it works? Sometimes you think like it doesn't have the energy enough to manifest fully or something. I don't know how it works, but I think sometimes you do get that for sure.
Right.
So,
yeah.
You said you had some other instances that happened. Yeah.
So I've got kind of 3 other things we could talk about.
Bring it.
So you can talk about like my mom and dad's growing up. One of my very first memories is being in my crib and hearing is like middle of the night and could hear what my parents snoring. And in the dining room, which was just down the hall from my room, I could hear these big boots walking around the wood floor of our dining room table. And then as it went around, it would pull chairs in or pull them out and push them back in. And that went on for a little while. And I called out to my mom. I remember calling to my mom saying like, Mom, what's going on? And like, classic movie. She's like, it's the wind. And that was it.
But I thought you were going to tell me she didn't wake up at all because that can happen too.
Right. No, she kind of shut it off. But my sister, her room was on the other side of that dining room, and she would talk about the boots not only walking around the table but coming down the hall right to her threshold.
Wow.
And then so that was kind of happening. There was one of our neighbors came over to play with us on a Saturday night, Knocked on the door, nobody answered. Knocked on the window, and as she did, she was like looking in and said that our mom came through the living room in this big white gown and didn't acknowledge her, and then never answered the door. Saturday nights for my family, we'd be at my grandparents' house for dinner, so nobody was there.
Right.
And, you know, for whatever validity it has, my sister and I, when we were younger, did a lot of Ouija board. And, you know, again, who knows what you're talking to,
right?
All that kind of stuff. But supposedly, something we were talking to was saying that a woman was buried on the property somewhere. There's no record of that. There's no history around that. But for our neighbor to have seen that and for that kind of corroboration, it was interesting.
How old was the house? Do you know, roughly?
Built in 1925.
Okay.
But the land itself, before the house was on there, it was all farmland.
Okay, yeah. So it could have. Yeah, it's hard to, especially family burial plots and stuff, you know, back in the 1800s. Not everybody went to, you know, sometimes they died on the farm, you buried them on the farm, you know.
Exactly.
Happened a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that whole area too, that land was strange. There was so you kind of go down a hill, and then there was where the road stopped, there was like an ATV trail. But we'd just climb up there and just go spend all day up there. It was awesome. Just beautiful woods. And in that part of, this is in Duluth, Minnesota, so it's right on the edge of Lake Superior, and a lot of old, you know, volcanic rock that's up there. So it's just like cliffs and bluffs.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. But my sister would go up there, and I don't remember all the stories that she has, but she said for sure one time she was up there and like kind of on the top of this hill, and she saw, I think she said, a ship with 5 lights kind of come in and spin and then land about like 80 yards away. And then they just kind of stood there waiting, and about 3 minutes later came up and just shot off into the sky. And there was just a lot of stuff like that growing up around. Like, you know, I'd see like a vapor like in the house or on the land that's in like a column shape or like
I've heard that before. Yeah.
Very weird. Very, very weird.
Was it a rural? Yeah. Was it a rural property? Like, or
it's like so Duluth is like 83,000 people, and where we were in the town is kind of on the edge of town. It's not quite rural. It's, I would say, in between the suburbs and exurbs.
Okay.
But lots of wooded space up there.
Yeah. I mean, for the record, you don't need rural areas for this stuff to happen.
Right.
You know, it happens in the middle of cities. But yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah. All of Duluth I think you'd had a guest on before from Duluth. She talked about the Bigfoot crossing the road down by the lake and going behind a sign, and when she was running in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've spent a lot of time down there too, and I mean, there's just so much has happened in that town, and it's a weird place. So yeah, I had a lot of cool experiences growing up there. So kind of shifting gears to the current house that my wife and I are in. We moved in 2019, and we're in kind of outside of Minneapolis, St. Paul, on the border of Wisconsin. There's the St. Croix River we're right on it. Really old, beautiful river. And yeah, we just bought a 85 split level house, just thinking it's a very normal house to do very normal things with. And almost right away, think in like the first few weeks that we were here, I was out sitting on the front step. It's like 10 o'clock or so. And again, like that kind of feeling hits. And out of the corner of my eye, I see legs in leopard print pants, like come right to about here. And then I turn and look, and then nothing's there. It was just the weirdest thing.
Just the legs.
Just the legs in leopard print pants.
Wow.
I don't know why that.
No, that's I don't. We've had several stories of disembodied legs. They're fun. You know, they're fun. They're humorous, but they're a thing for sure. Like,
yeah.
After we got the first one, I thought, well, it might be unique. And then one after another after that, for a while there, we had quite a few of them coming on.
Yeah. And you know, I've heard stories of disembodied legs before, and it's kind of like, okay, whatever. But like when it happens, it was so weird and so like unsettling. It like stuck in my gut for like a week.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And this was outside of your house.
Yeah, like I was sitting right on the front step, right in the lawn.
Huh.
Yeah. And so like simultaneously, my wife and I both were kind of starting to explore what our magical practices might be. And I think true to what a lot of people say, when you start doing that, kind of like throws up spotlights into the air.
I think it does. And I mean, to be fair, I think it can happen with any spiritual path, quite honestly.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess I feel like with maybe spiritual paths with a little more definition and like tradition, there's stuff built in. It's a little more protected. And when my feeling is like with magic, with like Western magic, is that it's a little more porous.
Right. And I think some practices, the very nature of them build in, let's say, a suspicion, if not an outright
skepticism.
Not even skepticism, just like stay away from that, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know, so yeah, and I think that's built into some, and I think you're literally putting up walls with that. Where if with magical practice, you're not really doing that because you're trying to contact, these things.
Yeah. So we started kind of doing that, and then we'd talk about how it felt like our house became like almost like a transit station.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're just things coming through. We'd have short little black things that would scurry around. We'd have
tell me more about that.
So I mean, it happened like quite a few times, but like, so like there'd be times when we'd be in the kitchen and we'd see like from the vent under the cabinets, it just like shoot out and go around the corner or past the corner. Those were always like kind of that size, pretty small, short. But then there would be times too where like we'd see like 5'10", 5'11" people pass by doorways or just be standing there or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's stuff like that. There was one, like a week where we didn't tell each other this till the week was over, but like we were both seeing like at the different ends of the hallway, this man in a tuxedo with no head just standing there like that.
Wow.
And we got to the end of this one week where I was seeing that, and it was like to my wife, like, I gotta tell you, like, I'm seeing this guy in here. She's like, oh yeah, I've been seeing him too.
Wow.
It's like, okay.
Are you, and it's so hard to say with all this stuff, but for shorthand, are you essentially kind of following the same path, or you kind of doing your own thing, you and your wife?
There are overlaps for sure.
Okay.
But she she's kind of more in, definitely just kind of more traditional pagan kind of route. I mean, I've kind of flowed all over the place, but yeah, at that time when I started, I was doing a lot of Golden Dawn stuff. So I was doing a lot of LBRPs everywhere, and just like, I'm sure, just fireworks, sending off fireworks everywhere.
I think in general, you know, when you start acknowledging this stuff, like I've always said, it's like, you know, you're putting on the One Ring, you know, the big eye of Sauron just turns and looks at you like, oh, okay, I see.
You want to play?
Yeah. So yeah. Were you getting creepy feelings from this stuff, or just kind of like, oh, it's there?
That stuff, not so much. Like, once we both kind of agreed, like, this doesn't feel bad, and that kind of more transit station feeling, it was just kind of like, that's fine. There was one time, and I don't know, I don't really know what to attribute this to, other than kind of raised energy in the house, but we had a week where we were just having arguments, and she went to bed, and I was staying up, and she said that she'd woken up, and she saw me walk up to the doorway, and that I was just standing there staring at her with this, like, really intense look on my face, like, really intense anger, but that I didn't look like me all the way. And so then I actually came to bed later, and she's like, were you mad at me? Or like, I can't remember what she said, but something along the lines of, were you upset with me about something? I was like, I haven't been up here, I've been down in the basement. She's like, you were standing in the doorway staring at me for minutes, and you wouldn't respond.
Wow.
Yeah. So that one was a little like, I don't know.
Yeah. That feels a little more, for sure.
Yeah.
Are you doing any sort of like, banishings, protection rituals, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, kind of built into, I'm much more kind of in a tradition now. And so, like, within that, it's kind of, like I said, all built together. And so the house is fairly protected. And we're also, I think we're just a little more, like, low to the ground with the practices now, too. It's much more, I'll say, at least for myself, like, it's a lot of what I'm doing has way more to do with just trying to just be a more effective, helpful person, kind of a thing. So less just contacting whoever for whatever reason.
Right, sure. Yeah. I never, like, people would always ask, like, what are you doing to protect yourself? And even before I returned to Catholicism as an adult, I was just kind of like, I don't know, I'm fine. I believe there's stuff in this house, but I believe it was here. It's nothing I brought here. I don't know.
Sure.
Maybe I did, but it seems like it didn't. But yeah, it's nothing that I've been terribly concerned about. I've always felt like, in my case, I felt like, Mary's got my back. I'm all right.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Well, honestly, I feel like that when you're in that current, in that flow of that, like, that's kind of like why I like it more than just doing, like, more of a chaos magic or whatever, where there's, like, you have the current kind of around you, and you don't have, there's much more of an ease to it. You don't have to, like, be paranoid all the time. And
yeah.
Doing all this stuff. So.
Yeah. Strange Familiars is brought to you by our patrons. Thank you, patrons. Thank you so much. We could not make the show without your help. If you like Strange Familiars and you'd like to help us make the show and get extra content besides, you can become a patron at Patreon. It's patreon.com/strangefamiliars. All of our patrons get commercial-free versions of the weekly shows, plus extra episodes every month. We do at least one exclusive episode of Strange Familiars for our patrons every month. Sometimes we do more. Our Patreon patrons also get to take part in an ongoing paranormal experiment, which has very much begun. It's not too late to jump in on that, though. You can jump in at any time and get caught up on it, but the exciting part of the experiment has begun. There's also a program on Apple Podcasts. It's called Patron of the Strange there, and our Apple Podcast subscribers get the commercial-free versions of the weekly show and the extra episodes monthly as well. And once again, thank you, patrons. No matter where you're signed up, it is a huge help.
And these two things kind of happened around the same time, which was really interesting. So my wife was doing a lot more work with our yard and the gardens and like really trying to give it some new life because it's just been kind of killed by the previous owners. And around that time, she'd like in her sleep, she'd grab me and like talk in her sleep about protecting me, and she'd wake up and talk about how like these roots were coming out of our closet and like reaching for her and stuff. But at that same time too, she'd like wake up and she'd see one specific time she talked about, she'd see this light in the yard doing like that kind of movement, and that it got really bright. And then I think it just went away.
This is not a dream. This is something she saw during
Very awake for that.
Okay.
Yep. Well, yeah, she'd like, well, I guess it's weird because I think she said that she like woke up and then just sat up and looked out the window and saw it doing that.
Wow. Yeah.
And around that time too, she'd just wake up and then she'd see a red light up in the corner of the ceiling or something like that. And then, as that's going on for her, so I was kind of dabbling in this more Christian, esoteric realm. And I had this dream. I'll just read it off as I wrote it down. Okay, so I was in an abandoned cathedral, which was vibrant from the grass growing up to the floor, and it was shaded from the sunlight by all this really light tree cover. It was beautiful. The ceiling was open. I was standing at a table or an altar with a priest wearing all white vestments, though on his mitre he had a red and violet band around it. He was pointing to a book and maps on this table, and there was like this uncertainty and frustration from what we're going to be doing. And at that point, I woke up. And I was just laying in bed thinking about the dream. And like a minute later, my wife, still sleeping, shot up and grabbed me and said very, very clearly, and I looked in the sky and I saw a hand. All the fingers were thumbs. It was Saint Raphael. And then she laid back down like nothing happened. Wow. And then I went back to sleep. And I was back at that table, and the priest looked at me and smiled and said, "Now we can continue."
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah. That didn't lead to any kind of revelation, any knowing revelation for me.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, but very weird.
Yeah. Patron saint of healing travelers and happy meetings.
And at that time, I was basically preparing to leave my career and start my master's program for psychotherapy.
Interesting.
Which I'm doing now.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Well, that's a form of healing for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, and he's been very, very present during all of that. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, that's one of those, well, especially to come out of it to have her say that, where it's like, not necessarily a shared dream, but it maybe an interlocking dream,
Right.
and then you're back into the dream when you fall asleep. Even if that the thing with your wife hadn't happened and you fell back and went back to the same place in the dream, that's pretty interesting and worth noting. But all that together, that's a really cool sequence of events. Yeah. And that's the frustrating thing. You have these big dreams and they don't always like have a real clear path. Like, oh, I need to go here next. And this, but it maybe in 10 years,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
or yeah, I just think even too, just maybe in a quieter way than I'm paying attention to, like,
mm-hmm.
On a much more subtle level, something is going on. So yeah. But cool experience.
Oh yeah, that's super cool. I do think dreams have something to do with this.
Absolutely.
Maybe not all the time, and certainly not every dream. Most of our dreams are processing the day's nonsense. I'm sure of that. But every now and then you get one of these dreams that's something. And the fact that, did you fall right back asleep after that thing with your wife?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. It's the same sort of feeling I get from the people. Like, yeah, I woke up, there was this weird entity in my room. I turned over and went to sleep, which I've done too, It's
right.
an odd thing, but it tells me that, yeah, I think there's something about sleep. Like it's these things probably speak in symbols anyway. And it's probably a lot easier to get through that way in your dreams. But yeah, that's a cool one. I really like that one.
Yeah.
I wish you knew what the maps were. Now I'm like, where did the maps go? What was the book?
I just, a thick book, red line going across it. That's all I remember.
Right. Yeah. May never know, but you hope one day you'll be in an old bookstore or something and see the book.
Yep.
That's the
totally.
one. I need to get that. But,
totally.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. So one more thing that happened here, and then I'll just talk about one more kind of chunk of things.
Yeah.
So actually, this is around the same time too. Yeah, we were starting to just kind of pay more attention to the sky for sure. Part of it just kind of studying astrology, and part of it just, I think, relating to nature more and appreciating it more.
Mm-hmm.
But we were like starting to kind of notice like these weird shapes on the horizon, especially at particular times of the day, and not really knowing what to make of it. But it just kind of kept happening. It was weirder. And then this one day, kind of looking at it and kind of realizing like, that looks, I think that's flight paths from a plane. And that's just because it was like February. And so the jet stream or the tails from the jets were leaving odd shapes. And so it's kind of like, that sucks. And almost right as that happened, we're standing and looking out our picture window, and like, I don't know, what we saw was probably right above the St. Croix River, which is about half a mile from our house. What I saw was what looked like a bronze bowl, or like this, just kind of a rounded shape, like a burnt bronze. And then on four sides had black plumes of smoke, making pillars of smoke that like tailed up.
Oh, wow.
And we were both, for a moment, thinking like, okay, another plane, but it just stayed there and never moved. And the smoke almost seemed to not move either. And it sat there for about maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then very, 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 very slowly, it just started drifting southeast. And I was like, okay, well, because there's a place that lifts up hot air balloons close to us, but it's like February. I was like, maybe something to do with that. But so I checked the wind, and at that moment, the wind was going north, and this thing is going that way. And it just kept going until we couldn't see it anymore. And then later, in the direction that we saw it go, I worked at a fabrication shop with some people that worked over that direction in the farmlands, and found out that basically where that thing went is over a town, I think it's called Elwood, Wisconsin, which it's known for its UFO sightings and has like a UFO day celebration with like a parade and everything.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, nothing big happened there, but kind of like it was this is really weird.
Was the smoke continuous? Like you saw the smoke the whole time?
Yeah, it never stopped. Like I said, sometimes it looked like it was kind of billowing out, and sometimes it looked like it was almost static.
Mm-hmm.
It was really weird. And then
I think you got to see a steampunk airship from the early 1900s.
That's what it kind of looked like.
Yeah, it sounds really cool. Jealous.
Yeah. And then like last summer, we were in our backyard using binoculars to look at the hot air balloons going over our house. And like, as we were sitting there, my wife was like, "What is that? Way, way up there." And she's looking, and then she hands it over to me. And I mean, it was tiny, 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 but it looked like a cylinder, like a silver cylinder, way, way up there. And we sat there for probably about 45 minutes just looking at this thing. It never moved, didn't go anywhere. And kind of was that thing of, well, I'm just going to go in the house because this isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah. How long can you sit and look at something?
Right. So, yeah.
I think, first of all, I think in general, once you start looking at the sky with intent, and I'm not saying everything up there is a UFO, but you're going to see things you can't identify. And in as much as that, they will be unidentified flying objects. But among them, I think are genuine UFOs as well. If you take the time to just go out and look at the night sky, you'll be surprised how often someone goes, you'll go, "Oh, that's a satellite," and then it'll do something very not satellite-like. And I'm not saying it's necessarily a UFO, but you'll be like, "Whoa, okay, that's not a satellite. That made a sharp turn and got brighter," whatever it does. So yeah, is it a matter of being tuned into this stuff, or is it a matter of just taking the time to look up,
Right. I know. Yeah.
Which
I was
maybe part of the same thing, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was actually up at a cabin around the place I was talking about with the other stories, at a cabin a few weekends ago, and we just went out at night, and we're just kind of looking around, and I looked up at the sky, and was tracking what I thought was a satellite, and then it started doing that kind of thing.
Yep.
And then, I'm like, "Guys, look it!" And as I say that, the thing stops, and I'm like pointing at it, like, "That one, just watch it." And for 10 minutes, it just stayed there.
Yeah,
like it knew.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, look, there are people who I trust who claim that I've never been able to do this. I've tried. I've done this experiment. Claim that they can get them to change colors, and they can get them to get brighter, and even call them above them and things like that. I'm there for it because I don't think these are little spacemen. If we're talking about little scientists from another planet, that makes zero sense. But if we're talking about something else, yeah, I mean, like I said, these are people I trust. I've not been able to do it, but that doesn't mean it can't be done.
Right. Yeah, it's wild stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
So, back around the time that first black dog story was going on, my dad and I would every year for a few years take a trip. We'd drive out from Minnesota to the Four Corners area, and we would just drive, and wherever we ended up, we'd camp, and either camp in the van or I had a hammock, whatever. And I think for 4 or 5 years we did that, and a lot of weird stuff happened. A lot of, I would say, mystical, transformative things happened. But there was one year that we were in Utah, and we'd gone to Zion, had like a amazing day. I went up to. Are you familiar with Zion?
No.
Okay.
I feel like I've heard the name and maybe even on the show, but I'm drawing a blank right now.
Okay. Yeah, it's a beautiful park. It's big canyon with big bluffs, and basically you can. That day I took this. I think it's like a 2-mile hike up to the top of the canyon. You can look all the way down. You're way, way up there. But I came down and was just elated and felt wonderful. And my dad was down there waiting for me, and so we packed up and we drove, and we didn't have anywhere to go, and so we found a place in the BLM out there, and it looked great. And so we set up, kind of started making dinner, getting ready for getting the fire going, and we set up our lawn chairs facing east, so the sun was starting to come down, and it was lighting up this whole canyon. It was so gorgeous. It's like we're sitting there, and the sun is starting to go below the horizon, and as it does, I don't know if this is actually a thing, but it seems reasonable to me. Like as it was going down, the line of sunlight was starting to recede, and it was like as it did. Again, I think this is a thing. The atmosphere would start to cool.
Okay.
But like as that line came closer, there was like this ripping kind of roaring sound. Getting closer and closer. So like very slow, it was just like whoa. And it like got to us, and I was like, whoa, okay. That was big. So that just kind of to set a tone. Before we'd left for this trip, I was kind of starting to entertain, coming from a more atheistic, materialistic view. I was just really starting to explore spirits and connection and all that. And I had the intention with this trip of like, I want to go connect with something, which is really not a smart way to intend to do anything. So I had that in mind as we're out in the BLM. It's like, perfect. Like, this is open. This is the land itself. I want to connect with something here. And like, sun goes down, start cooking dinner, and it is like, it's just kind of like that scene in A New Hope when in the trash compactor with the walls coming in, but it was of feeling of like anger and like antagonism, just like moving in and in and in. And for like an hour, like I was just having these terrible feelings and like really terrible thoughts, to the point where I was kind of incapacitated, and I just kind of had to tell my dad, like, I gotta go lay down. I can't really handle this, which freaked him out. So I went and laid in the van and fell asleep. Later that night, I was looking out the side window of the van, and way up, I could see this pin of light kind of come down and do that thing, do that, and then shoot off. And I didn't really even register it, and I fell right back asleep.
As you do.
And then, yeah, right. Well, and then I woke up a little while later with a weirder feeling, and I looked down towards my navel, and right over my navel, I saw these 2 green balls of light doing this.
Oh, wow.
And they did that for like 15 seconds, and then went right down in my stomach, and then I fell asleep again.
Wow. How big were they?
Like that.
Okay. All right.
And all I can say is that after that, I went through a really rough time.
Really?
And yeah. And I can't even say that it was necessarily, it didn't destroy my life, but it like, I kind of started all the way over. So it was really hard to know what to make of
Yeah, I mean,
All that.
I'm immediately reminded of a story Soraya tells where he said something, and I forget what it was. I think it was like some sort of like black thing. Literally jumped into his body. He said he felt like his morals were off, like after that,
Oh,
and he like was doing things that he wouldn't normally do, kind of thing. And he said after a few days of that, he told it to get out, and then he said it was better after that. So
really?
yeah, and I don't remember in the story if he saw it leave him or if he just just kind of went out. I think he went out to the place where he thought it went into him and told it there, like, you need to leave.
Did he see it with his eyes or with his mind? Or
He saw it with his eyes go in him, I believe.
wow.
But I don't know. As to it leaving, I don't recall whether he saw something actually physically leave him or if he just got the feeling that it was gone or whatever. But
Wow.
yeah, it's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
So how long
to me,
did it take you, let's say, to get back on track or to sort of
I
work
mean,
through that?
it ongoing. And all that to say, like, I love my life right now, and
Mhm.
I think I'm the happiest I've ever been. But it's like I definitely can't, demarcate any place where like I feel like okay, now I'm good.
Sure.
It's like
Yeah.
it's been a lot of work for a
Mhm.
long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
Well, and how long ago was that?
2017,
Okay. All right. So,
yeah, 8 years.
well, life's always here. This is, it's always that journey, right? But
It's for sure.
it's
For
really
sure.
interesting that you felt like things went awry after that.
Yeah, no, and like I was talking about with that, like kind of coming in, it almost felt like that was a fuse that kind of started
Mm-hmm.
what would happen that night, and then everything after that. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Huh.
yeah. So it's funny, like listening to your show and some other ones, and and kind of in 2019 get into Hellier and all that stuff. Like for a long time, I would always think like, oh, I want stuff to happen to me, and then like I kind of took inventory after hearing all the stories on the show and everything. It's like, oh, like yeah, stuff has been happening to me,
Yeah.
like my whole life.
Yes. Yeah, that's the thing. And I say this probably every other episode. I'm convinced that's the case for most people. And some people either shut it out or they don't want to deal with it or whatever it is, because when I talk to people and they say, what do you do? And I tell them what I do. I'm pretty fearless about it at this point. They'll go, oh, nothing like that ever happened to me. And then they'll start talking. And then, well, I did see this weird light one time. And then this thing happened in my house, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm thoroughly convinced that for whatever reason, a lot of people just kind of put this to the side and
Oh, yeah.
and just they either don't or won't focus on it.
Yeah. My aunt kind of removed herself from the family, my aunt on my mom's side, and hadn't talked to her in a long time. And a few years ago, started to come in contact with her again. And we started talking about growing up, what it was like for my mom's family. And like all throughout my life, we talk about the ghosts in the house, all this kind of stuff. My mom would be like, I don't see it. I don't know what you're talking about. And talking to my aunt, I mean, my aunt says their house was incredibly haunted.
Hmm.
My aunt has an episode of like a combination of Bigfoot and missing time, like a
Wow.
like significant missing time,
Yeah.
and seeing UFOs go down to Lake Superior.
Give her
So
my
like
number.
all. Yeah, for sure. No, she's got a lot to say.
I want these stories.
But, my mom never qualified it. And now, like, with some health stuff, my mom's been saying a little bit more. And it's kind of like, oh, I think it was probably just too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, like
Yeah,
you said,
that
just.
was like with my own mother. Like I said, there was a time that she came in, woke me up. Like I said, I think I was 8 years old. Asked me if I wanted to see a UFO. was not scared. My mom was a nervous woman, very, like, generally just nervous and afraid. Showed no fear of this. Do you want to come see a UFO? You know? Another time there was a weird light in the back of the farm. I could see it. And I said, Mom, what is that? And she just oh, that's a will-o-wisp. And just, like, no big deal. Now, I don't know if she was doing that for my sake. Like, she didn't want to scare me, which would have been in her wheelhouse to do. It's quite possible. But she was so matter-of-fact about it that I didn't think will-o'-the-wisp were a weird thing for many years. I thought it was just like some kind of natural thing, like a firefly or something. You know, that's how matter-of-fact she was about it. And in fact, we had some willow trees on the farm, and I thought it had something to do with willows. Like, I thought she said it's a willow-wisp. Yeah, I didn't, I was just a little kid. I didn't know exactly. So it was years and years before I figured, oh, that's something weird. Like, that's something I should, that was actually, but she was very matter-of-fact about that. She was also, like I said, well, this woman had every Stephen King book first printing the day it came out. And she'd be like, why are you into all this dark stuff? Like, come on, Mom. Don't throw stones. But, yeah, but in general, I wondered, like, did she just not want to talk about that stuff too much? I don't know. And then by the time I had started the podcast, she was in a nursing home, and it was just, her memory just wasn't there. It just wasn't there. So never got to ask her. But yeah, I don't know whether they block it out or they're just like, no, we shouldn't talk about that. I don't know what the case is.
Well, I feel like coming into magical practice and all that kind of stuff, and having more experiences of direct experience, and I kind of understood with myself, like, when I was a kid, I didn't want it. I'd push it away. Mm-hmm. But then there's also this tension of, like, but I'd always want that. Mm-hmm. And so I'd be doing this a lot because of that fear.
Yeah.
And like, now kind of understanding my fear and having a different relationship with it. I think, to your point, like, there's, with the people that just have that natural attraction and natural relationship to that aspect of life, I think it's figuring out how to negotiate the fear around it. Mm-hmm. And to still have a healthy fear of it.
Yeah, it's so odd because, and this is, upon Brother Richard's advice, I changed my approach to this, because I would go out at night and I would just be like, I'd be afraid and I'd be out there, And I really changed that because, like, he was talking about, like, hey, you're going to get back some of what you put in. And it made sense to me. And I thought, well, let me calm down. Let me sort of, like, center myself and go out there with a different attitude. And I am much happier. I will say that. And now I'm not saying I never get scared out there. I do. Like, so there's some scary times out there. You're in the woods at night. It's dark. I mean, remove everything paranormal. There's stuff out there that you can't see, We've recorded mountain lion chirps, like 100%. Yeah. That's what it was. I know we're out there with creatures that could be a problem if they chose to be beyond anything supernatural. But that change in my attitude has made my experience of this so much more positive over time. It's difficult to talk about because it's not like it never gets scary. Because of course it does. Sometimes it's odd, it's weird stuff, and sometimes it gets a little frightening. But you sort of mitigate that, I guess. I don't know. You bring as much positivity and as much, lack of fear, and calmness to it as you can, and I think you'll have, a better experience. And I do believe there are people who are sort of called to this, and people. Like, if you in your gut know you're terrified of it, maybe listen to other people's stories,
Yeah.
But some other people they're called to it. And that's why on the show, when I talk about places that aren't private property that people can go to, I know people are going to go there. And I always just say, well, please be respectful. Don't make a mess. Don't make a lot of noise. Just be quiet and respectful. Because I know there are some people who are drawn to it and, they're going to go there.
Right.
And I mean, for that reason, when it is a public place, we'll tell you where it is. We'll tell you where we're going. You said that you came from a place of non-believing or atheism. Were you raised that way, or did you sort of go through an atheist phase and then come back at it?
No, we attended a Methodist church, but it was very Methodist. It was for where we were and everything. It was just kind of everybody went just because. At home, it was back in like the 80s and 90s. There was like the bigger Reader's Digest books of like unexplained like UFOs and ghosts and
I have a couple of those. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like those were like center stage. We'd watch, Unsolved Mysteries, X-Files. Like it was very present in the house. The other, for lack of a better term. And then, I think because I was in college around the time of the Four Horsemen of Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris and all them, and I was very taken by that, and so a lot of these things that I experienced and all that I explained away,
right? And
it took a lot of effort to explain it away, and honestly, I just found myself being really unhappy and like not really jiving with my thoughts, weren't jiving with my experience, and then I don't know. I think actually the thing that opened the door was there's like a 12-hour lecture series of Alan Watts. And I would just walk in the woods and listen to that. And it just kind of like everything came back in.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, here I am again.
I wonder, and this again, not for everybody, but I wonder if you could chart a path for people that if atheism or some form of hard agnosticism or something isn't a step on that path for a lot of people, because
I think it is.
Yeah, I was the same way for a little bit. I was just like, and I was really struggling with, because I knew I had this connection, especially to nature, and I was trying like, how do I marry these things? And it was actually some Buddhist reading that finally like kind of helped bridge that for me, and kind of brought me out of that a little bit. But yeah, I do wonder if that's just like a logical step along the way, that for some people at least,
Yeah, I think if you're curious about, if you have that deep curiosity about the world and just kind of that more existential mind, I think it's kind of a natural, you kind of have to go there and test it out, try it on.
Yeah, let me explore this. Let me explore nothing for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's pretty vast to explore nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, in a way. Yeah.
It's just, for me, it just ended up being very sad.
Yeah, I agree.
Dry.
I agree, absolutely. And and again, it'd be, it's a study for someone who's not me to do, but I wonder, you talk about steps along the way, how many people stop there, and is there a correlation between, happiness or contentment, and moving on or not, and it may just be a matter of different strokes for different folks. I don't know.
Yeah. I had a Vajrayana mentor who did chaplaincy work and hospice work specifically. And he would talk about like working with atheists, and that it was no problem for him because pretty much anyone there's always like a meaning that ends up being mysterious. So he gave the example of working with this mathematician. And so he asked about religion and all that, and the guy said no. And he asked, like, what is the thing that, brings mystery and brings inspiration? He's like, oh, math. And so they, like, basically had a theological discussion about, like, math.
Yeah, yeah.
And but it had so much meaning for him that it alternately, like, he was still doing it just without the language and the system and all that.
Yeah, and I think that happens too. I think a lot of people, they have a very sort of spiritual approach, whether they would call it that or not. They're just putting different tags on it. Yeah.
I agree.
Jason, on the morning of April 18th, 1961, Joe Simonton saw a silver disc on his farm. He went out, investigated, stepped aboard the craft. There he encountered 3 dark-skinned humanoids who handed him an empty jug. He filled it with water and brought it back for them. In return, they gave him some pancakes. Would you eat the pancakes?
I would have to.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just for my run through this life, I've just those kinds of risks for me are the ones worth taking.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I saw a video of the actual Joe Simonton recently. I'm going to have to try to track it down because I want to grab the audio and play it on the podcast because it's so interesting. But he ate one. Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah. He said they weren't super flavorful, but he said, I think he said something like, if that's what they eat, well, no wonder they came here or something like that. But yeah, so.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've had a lot of the back and forth, with the ties, potentially to Fae
Mm-hmm.
and all that, and the dangers of eating Fae food.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would I really do that? It's kind of like, I don't know. I presented the opportunity, and not everybody gets it. So
I think recently I had someone on who said it'd have to be the vibe of the situation. I think that's where I sit right now. If I'm getting good vibes from it, then yeah, maybe I'll do it. If I'm getting anything weird, thanks guys, and put them in my pocket. But,
yeah.
All right, Jason, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I appreciate it.
I Have Never Minded the Loneliness, Hermits and Their Stories, is the latest book by Timothy Renner. What compels a person to leave behind society, forsaking family, friends, and the comforts of modern life to live in solitude? The hermits of the 19th and early 20th centuries are as fascinating as they are mysterious. These enigmatic figures often became the focus of public interest, with newspaper stories turning them into local legends, folk heroes, and symbols of a life apart. In I Have Never Minded the Loneliness, you'll discover the extraordinary lives of hermits who defied convention. John Stink, rumored to have died and risen again more than once. William Woodruff, whose long vow of silence followed a broken heart. Brusher Mills, the serpent hunter who sold his own snake oil remedies. And Truman Commodore Downs, who claimed Mars as his homeland. These stories and many more reveal the complex lives of individuals who chose to live apart from the world. I Have Never Minded the Loneliness is available now at Amazon.com or wherever you buy books. So we did a little research on this card, and we found it is older than either of us thought it was. And if you ask me, would there have been a Cthulhu postcard from the 1940s? I would have been doubtful of it. Now I know the Lovecraft stories are from the 20s. You know what I mean? I know they predate that. But as far as there being like a postcard with like fantasy art on it from that time.
And this very much looks like, it looks very 1960s, but it is not apparently.
No. I wonder if we didn't look it up before, because I really thought it was from the 60s. And then looking it up tonight, we found it's from the 40s.
Had you heard of that artist previously as like a sci-fi artist or something?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm sure when I picked it up, I just picked it up because it was Cthulhu. I didn't even, think twice about it. I'd never seen a Cthulhu postcard of any type. Mm-hmm. So I picked it up. But I think I have heard of the artist. It's Ralph Rayburn Phillips.
Apparently he died in 1974, so bare minimum this has to predate that. And from what I saw previously on another card that sold on Worth Point, it said it was from 1948.
So this is Great Cthulhu and His World. It's a postcard here. If you like Lovecraft, you like Cthulhu, pretty unique collectible from that side of things. This will be our Curiosity of the Week. I'll put an image of this in the show notes. If you click on that, it'll take you to our Etsy shop where you can purchase that and other Curiosities of the Week, those that are left. Also at Etsy, Strange Familiars, stickers, t-shirts, patches, and more. My books are there. If you get them from us on Etsy, I will sign them before we pack them up and ship them out. Artwork, prints, and originals, including the artwork for tonight's show, should I finish it in time, and more. Allison has some ephemera up there, some old photos and other things. Go ahead and check it out. Our shop name is Lost Grave. but if you type in Strange Familiars, you should see our stuff come up at Etsy. There's links to the Etsy shop in the show notes of every episode and at strangefamiliars.com as well. If you are in the South Central Pennsylvania area, go ahead and check out Allison's shop at State Theater Vintage in Columbia, Pennsylvania, and the shop we share with Chad over in Hanover at Black Rose Antiques. So we got some information on Saturday as well that Albatwitch Day is moving to another town. It's not far at all. It's basically up the hill from Columbia. The next town north is Marietta. And that's where Albatwitch Day has moved. And we just found this out. So that's where Albatwitch Day will be this year.
We'll update when we get the absolute concrete, this is set in stone details. So
Yes, we will. I think it's in a park. This is all new information to us. So,
I just wanted to keep saying it over and over again so people don't show up.
yeah, and that's in October. So it's a long time away, but it's not going to be in Columbia this year. All right, I think that's it for this episode of Strange Familiars. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more. Strange Familiars is a production of Dark Holler Arts. Intro and background music is by Stone Breath. If you want to hear more or purchase music, you can go to stonebreath.bandcamp.com. We're on Instagram at Strange Familiars. One word, no underscore. Please give us a follow there. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/Strange Familiars. There's the Strange Familiars Gathering group there, which you can join and discuss the show and various other topics in that realm. Speaking of, I logged on to the Facebook group and I realized we haven't approved messages for 10 days or something. Chad and I are the monitors. We both get busy and forget sometimes. Believe it or not, it's not a paying position. Chad doesn't make any money for being a monitor. He's just helping me out doing that. So, sorry, folks. Sometimes we forget, but I went in and improved a bunch of old messages, and I'll try to stay on top of that a bit more. For Strange Familiars merch, go to strangefamiliars.com/merch. And for everything else, links to everything we do, information, etc., strangefamiliars.com.
Crown of thorns, braided on that Friday morn, and placed upon thy sinless head, bears the precious jewels of red. Those ruby gems adorn thy thorny diadem, and like crimson rivers ran from thy head, O Son of Man. twisted crown of thorns, braided on that Friday morn, and placed upon thy sinless head, bears the precious jewels of red.